Welcome to this cozy little corner of our house that we get to call our kitchen. I am so excited to bring you along in this space and share with you some of the changes we have recently made to not only make this space cozier, but also a lot more functional, and we did it for about $170. I am so excited to share this with you because about a week and a half ago, this is more what our kitchen looked like. We had stark white cabinets that were peeling so bad that our little 9-month-old baby was finding little pieces of paint on the ground to eat, and that's when I knew it was time to make a change to these cabinets. Also, our hardware was falling off. Some of it was broken, our screw holes were stripped, and doors were falling off of their hinges. One day I asked Riley, what would you do if you came home from work and I had just taken all the kitchen cabinets off and started redoing the kitchen? And he said, I wouldn't be surprised. And I took that as permission to just jump right in. So that's what I did. Riley went back to work and I also went to work on these kitchen cabinets. In this video, I'm going to be sharing major lessons learned when it comes to refinishing your cabinets. Hopefully I can save you a little bit of time and money with some things that I learned. I'm also going to be breaking down costs and showing you how I kept this entire kitchen remodel under $200. At the end, you'll see the whole reveal and you'll get to see the whole finished kitchen, and I am so excited to show it to you guys. Okay, first step was sanding. I spent countless hours sanding. The worst part was by far the cabinet doors. My mom was so sweet and actually came up one day and helped me sand a bunch of the doors and even helped me watch Sage. I would say that it's not necessary to get all of the paint off of the doors. I at first tried this method, so I used paint stripper and was really trying to get all that paint off, and it was kind of a nightmare. I don't know what it is with me and paint stripper, but we do not go together. I've never had much success with it. Maybe I'm not doing it right, but I found that I could just use a really light sandpaper, really fine grit sandpaper, and just smooth out the edges, get off any paint chips or places where the paint was peeling, and this seemed to do just fine. So I actually didn't end up removing all the paint. I just smoothed everything down and made sure that I got up all of those parts that were peeling and chipping. Next came the tedious job of taping everything off, and while this part is really annoying, it is also really nice and helpful and saves you a lot of headache in the long run. Next, I primed the cabinets. I really wanted to sand well and prime well because I think the previous owner just quickly painted these cabinets in an effort to sell the house. I don't think they primed, and I'm not even sure if they sanded because the wood underneath was really smooth and glossy. I sanded everything down. I used Kills primer. It's primer I already had on hand, so I didn't count it as a cost. It's left over from a previous project, but I've used this primer for so many things and it seems to work really well. Next, I needed to pick out a paint color, which yes, I did start this whole process before I even knew what color I was painting our cabinets. I went back and forth a lot. I thought about maybe a cream color. I wanted something that would really warm up the space. With our dark countertops, I felt like I just needed something that wasn't so highly contrasted as the white was. I ended up going with this muted sage green, and I mean, are we all surprised? We all know I love the color green. It's always been my favorite color. Even our firstborn daughter is named a sage for more sentimental reasons than just that. But I do love me some sage green, and I loved the way it complemented our countertops. I ended up using cabinet specific paint. This one's by Bear, and I used this semi-gloss version. The reason why is that it is a little bit more durable and you don't notice the imperfections quite as much. That came out to about $60. Now, I will be the first to admit that maybe a little bit of girl math was involved in calculating the total cost. I did not include the cost of any supplies or materials that I already had on hand, and so I am only including here things that I specifically had to buy and use only for this project. I just think that's important to note because if you don't have things like rollers and brushes and tools specific to these projects, that could be an additional cost that you might want to factor in when deciding if you are going to remodel your kitchen. Okay, here are the top things I learned from painting these cabinets. First of all, it is worth investing in a paint sprayer, I think. I did not, but one day I want to. If I ever refinish kitchen cabinets again, I will, because I think it just leaves a cleaner finish and it's so much faster and easier. Second thing I learned was use a roller as much as possible if you're not using a paint sprayer. I tried to use a brush for a lot of this project and ended up having to go back over everything with a roller anyway, just to kind of smooth out all the lines and get really, really nice smooth smooth strokes. I did have to use a brush obviously in the details and the little crevices, but overall the roller worked way better. Next thing I learned was don't put your cabinet door directly on the ground. I did this at first and the paint would run over the edges and pull up underneath, leaving these clumps of paint on the underside of the cabinet. I learned that it's far better to put your cabinet doors on blocks of wood or something that elevates them off the ground. That way when your paint runs, you can kind of wipe it up, even it out, and it's not just sitting in a pool of paint underneath and causing those ridges. Even with the primer, I ended up needing to do 2 coats of paint at a minimum. Some cabinet doors actually required even more than that. If I were just using the brush, I probably would have had to do even more coats of paint than that. Our kitchen is a great size for us, but it is definitely on the smaller end. We don't have that many cabinets, and I still went through an entire gallon of paint. So keep that in mind as well. If you have a larger kitchen, that's probably going to mean more paint and a little bit higher cost. Okay, let's talk hardware. I did want to replace this hardware just to kind of update it, and I thought gold looked really nice with these kitchen cabinets. I did buy some hardware, so these long handles that I'm showing you here, I bought on Amazon, so I did replace those. That hardware came out to $35, so that was my next expense. My order came with a pack of 10, which meant that I was still short some handles, so rather than buying more handles to cut costs, I bought some spray paint and I actually sanded down some of the existing handles. I just used a fine grit sandpaper to roughen up the handle so that the paint would really adhere well. And then I just spray painted these existing handles. And this was actually really fun because it kind of gave a good mixture of the long handles and the round ones. I liked the contrast. And this spray paint I got on Amazon. The color was champagne bronze, the same color as my handles. So I guess I said gold, but technically they were champagne bronze. And it cost me $10, so that was my next expense. I like the way that the round handles look with the long handles. Also, it does not matter how beautiful your kitchen is if it's not functional, and those little fridge magnets are Sage's favorite thing to play with when I'm cooking. Underneath the kitchen peninsula, I knew I wanted to do something kind of different and break up all that green color, and so I found some beadboard, and this is actually natural wood beadboard. I didn't want painted. I wanted to see the natural wood and kind of make it really warm and cozy and organic looking. I actually got this beadboard for free at Home Depot. So Riley and I went looking for beadboard. We could only find 1 sheet of natural wood beadboard, and so we asked everyone where we could get more, and nobody knew. Nobody could find it in their inventory. And finally the lumber manager came over and helped us, and he said that it's actually a protective panel that comes with the primed and painted beadboard that they sell, and that it's actually just a scrap piece of wood that was meant to be thrown away. So if we wanted to have it for free, we could, which was like a major score. I do want the beadboard to wrap around the peninsula maybe at some point, but we only had enough for the front of the peninsula, which was okay. It was actually the perfect size. I just had to trim off like 1/4 of an inch to get it to fit. The beadboard was a little bit short, so we bought some trim to go on top of it just to fill in that gap between where the beadboard ended and the countertop. I don't remember exactly how much I spent on this trim, and I tried to look it up online and couldn't find the exact one. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe $5, but I factored that into the cost of our wood. At the end, you'll see I have to buy some more wood for another part of our kitchen, so that'll all be factored in together when I show expenses. We used liquid nails and then actual nails to attach this beadboard. I recruited Riley's help here. We don't have a nail gun. I would love to have a nail gun, but we don't have one yet. So we used an old-fashioned hammer and did it the manual way, but it attached really well with no issues. I didn't have to buy the liquid nails or the actual nails. They were all left over from doing the beadboard or the board and batten in Sage's bedroom. When it came to staining the board and batten, I kind of used a mixture of stains. So I started with some weathered oak and then ended up adding in some other colors. I just kind of mixed different stains that I already had on hand until I was happy with it. What I was trying to do was replicate the look of the stain on our table that I redid last year, if you guys remember that video. And I just wanted to kind of carry that through. So I did it here, and then you'll see I repeat it somewhere else in our kitchen in a minute. But it took a second to really get the color that I wanted. I wanted it to feel really warm and really cozy, but once I did, I was really happy with it. I think this wood color turned out so beautiful. It is very warm and cozy, and you'll see later on how it complements other accents that I add to the kitchen. I am really happy with this mixture of stains. Our neighbor is actually remodeling their house, so they gave us their bar stools. There is a third one. I'm going to paint the bottoms green and stain the top. I think this will be really cozy in this space. Our last project was getting rid of this triangular shaped cabinet. On the one hand, it does hold a lot of storage and it's nice that you can access it from both sides, but ultimately we decided it just juts out too far in the peninsula and takes up too much counter space. So we decided to remove it from the wall and replace it with floating shelves. And we were pleasantly surprised that we have almost the same amount of storage with our floating shelves, so I think it was a good move overall. We had to putty over some of the damage done to the wall and then let that dry and just use fine grit sandpaper to sand and smooth everything out. I did go through and paint it the same color as the wall. There was a leftover can of paint in our garage from the last owner. It was dried out, so I took it into Lowe's to have them color match and get me a new gallon, and I learned that you actually want to get a chip of your wall because your walls change color over time. So I had to come back to the house, get a chip of the wall, and then color match it. So just another little lesson learned. This is the hardware that I used for our floating shelves. They're not true floating shelves. You can see the hardware, but I kind of like that. This came with black hardware, but it was the best one we could find. So I actually just used the rest of the spray paint to spray paint this hardware so it matched the handles and everything else. I even spray painted the screws that it came with as well, just to make everything nice and uniform. When I bought this hardware, it was actually on sale, so I only paid $30, which is my next expense. For my wood for the floating shelves, I used 12-inch common board that I got from Home Depot. I spent about $30 on this wood and then $5 for the trim that I talked about earlier under the kitchen peninsula. That means that I spent about $35 on wood, which brings us to a grand total of $170 spent on this project. There's one more thing I realized that I forgot to include in my expenses, and that was wood filler. I did have to fill in a lot of screw holes that were stripped on my hardware. I did buy some wood filler for this. I didn't include it though because A, I forgot to, and then B, I'm also using that for a lot of other projects, so it wasn't really specific just to this project. That costs between $5 to $10 depending on how big of a size you get. I sanded my common board down really well, especially in the corners. I wanted to round the corners. It gives it more of a butcher block feel and a finished feel rather than those sharp corners. And then I just sanded the wood enough to be able to stain them, and I used the same stain concoction that I used for under the peninsula just so they would match and be the same color. They turned out really nicely. Alright, time for the big reveal. Reminder, this is what it looked like before and this is the after. It's just so much cozier and more open. I like that I have a better sight line. I can see my baby in her high chair when I'm cooking in the kitchen now that we don't have that big cabinet in the way. I love being able to display our beautiful dishes that we've collected over the years, and I just feel really cozy in this space. I love our kitchen window. We have a little herb drying place. We have a huge garden, and so this has been fun to be able to dry some of our herbs. I also displayed my grandma's artwork to inspire me. My grandma was a professional artist, and I'm just really inspired by looking at her work, and seeing that every day in our kitchen window is just so tender. I also have lots of thrifted decor all throughout our kitchen. This little wooden picket fence I made, I just cut off the tops of some wood fencing that we were using for a different project. We didn't need the tops, and so I just glued them onto a board to kind of hide the pots that we sometimes grow plants in our kitchen window. And this is kind of what it looks like and feels like as you walk into the kitchen. I love also bringing in flowers from our garden into this beautiful new space. There are obviously some things we could still do to this kitchen to really update it, like switching out some appliances. If we could update our countertops, that would be awesome. But I think it's important to just start with what you have and where you're at and do what you can in the moment, and then slowly, maybe over time, we can make certain updates. I do want to refinish those bar stools, and other than those small changes, we'll probably wait for a while before we update any appliances or countertops or anything like that. But even with that being said, I love this space. I love how cozy it is, and I love that I got to bring you along. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Jenica, and I make videos designed to help moms who want to create cozy, beautiful, and functional spaces on a budget. So we talk all things crafting, DIY, decorating, and organization around here. I hope you'll join, subscribe, and follow along because I have a lot of fun videos coming. I'll catch you in the next one.